is the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Over there we have the Lincoln Memorial. Over there we have the David Washington Monument. And today we have a conversation with Stuart Eizenstat, an American diplomat and a former ambassador of the United States to the European Union. In this conversation, we'll be talking about his latest book, The Art of Diplomacy, based on hundreds of interviews with the best negotiators across people that he met, such as Kissinger, such as hundreds of people that he worked with. And something that the reason why we decided to report it here in the memorial is because diplomacy is not just a fancy word to get things done. It's an important thing, not only now, but also in the future, because we certainly do not want to have another memorial for a future war in the world. But we talked in this episode about what is and how to be a good negotiator, what it means to be a diplomat, and some of his thoughts on the war of Ukraine, Russia, Israel and Palestine, and even Venezuela. Thank you.
America's an idea. That's why we lead the world. Stu gets that.
From your experience, from 81 years, if I remember correctly, what do you think you've learned about how to talk to people, not only from the big stages, but even just from the small talk with regular people?
The first thing is to really talk to people and not just appear to talk to them. That is to listen to what they say. In fact, one of the things I say as a critical skill for a negotiator is the ability to listen to the other side, put yourself in their shoes, and understand their perspective. So, too many people in politics will see somebody and they're already looking over their shoulder at the next person who does. Bill Clinton had a great capacity to, even if it was for 30 seconds in a crowded room, to give his undivided attention to you. So I think really listening to the other person. Second is trying to find common ground with the other person. Be respectful if there are differences, and try to find an area where you can agree. And if you disagree, to do it respectfully. Third is to be kind and thoughtful to other people. Not to ever think that you're better than they are, because maybe you've accomplished more, you have a better education. Every person has a human dignity, and they want to be respected, and they will respect you if you respect them. To be someone who is a blue-collar worker, someone who is cleaning a bathroom, someone who is, a maid in a hotel, deserves the same respect as someone who has a PhD. They're all doing their job. They want to know that their job is respected and that they're respected.
When you think of the word or negotiation or the best negotiator, what do you think of?
Well, I interviewed 130 people for this book. All of them were fantastic negotiators. I think at the very top would be Henry Kissinger, who wrote the foreword to my book, and James Baker. And the reasons are that first, they had a capacity to put negotiations into a strategic context. Second, they were able to develop, as Jim Baker did during their German reunification talks, a personal relationship with their adversaries. They didn't see the person on the other side as being an adversary to be humiliated, to be defeated. You can't succeed in a negotiation. You think it's a game. It's not a poker game where one side wins and the other side loses. A sovereign country with whom you're negotiating also has a constituency. They have to go back with the agreement to their leadership. So both Baker and Kissinger had a strategic capacity to put their negotiations in broader context. They had a capacity to put themselves in the other shoes. Let me give you an example with Kissinger. In 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel was on its heels with the surprise attack. They counterattacked, and they had the Egyptian Third Army totally surrounded. They could have totally crushed. Kissinger went to Golda Meir, the Israeli prime minister, and said, if you succeed in destroying the Third Army, you will achieve a short-term military victory, but at the expense of a lasting peace. You've got to let Sadat, the president of Egypt, come out of this with his own confidence and his own standing intact with his own people, if you ever expect to be peaceful. It's that capacity to be able to do that. It was Baker's capacity to develop a personal relationship with Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze that allowed him, he took him to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where he had a retreat. And they spent several days just talking about their families, their kids, their dreams for the future. And that allowed Shevardnadze to take positions like accepting the unification of Germany within NATO that were against his own foreign ministry's views, because they established that sense of confidence in power. Third reason that I think is critical in negotiations is courage. Not the courage of the battlefield, but the courage to break from established positions. So, for example, when Sadat went to Jerusalem, he ended up losing his foreign minister over that, but he had the courage to try to break. When the Crown Prince of the UAE did the same many years later and reaching out to Egypt, to Israel, he had the courage. In the Good Friday Agreement, ending the 20-year civil war between the Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland, the political leadership on both sides had the courage to break from their established positions at the expense of their own base. And so political courage is critical, and Kissinger and Baker had that, but they also were able to draw that out in their negotiating partners.
Knowing and spending time with so many people, right, while writing your book and over the years, how do you think that has changed how you think, to see you as a person?
Well, I think it's given me a sensitivity in my own negotiations. I mean, several of the negotiations, like the Holocaust negotiations, the Kyoto global warming negotiations, which I led, I was able to incorporate many of the lessons for me to be always prepared, to seize an opportunity, to be determined to see success. I call this the art of diplomacy because you have to be creative. There are always going to be barriers that come up, impasses. So, example, when George Mitchell was negotiating a Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, the militias representing the Catholic and Protestant communities were still killing each other in the middle of the negotiations. And they said, how can you negotiate with that kind of violence occurring? And he came up creatively with something called the Mitchell principles, which were, okay, we can't get you to disarm. Sign an agreement that you want to resolve this dispute peacefully. And that kind of creativity was able to avoid an impasse. So in all negotiations, you're going to have those barriers that come up, and you have to be creative. Again, that's why I call it the art of negotiations. I'm art of diplomacy. So maybe one more question.
One more question. When you look at the situations today, so you have the Israel conflict right now, and you also have the Ukraine and Russia one, and you could even go to the...
Yeah, I really need to read it. So I'll just say with Ukraine, I think that Henry Kissinger said you can't win at the negotiated table, but you don't win on the battlefield. But I think that the divisions are so short that there won't be a formal peace agreement. I think it's going to be an armistice like the 1953 Korea War, where you have a dividing line. If we do that, we can't recognize the acquisitions of Ukrainian territory by force. We can't believe the sanctions, but we are not going to be able to have a formal treaty. I think we'll have, I hope, a permanent armistice along the dividing line, and that's why it's so important that we armed Ukraine and give it the capacity to get back as much of its territory as it can.
Do you know anything on Venezuela?
But Maduro's very tough as long as he's got the support of the military. It's very hard to get him. He clearly stole the election.
So what's the solution there?
Sanctions, economic isolation, political isolation.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and no matter where you are in your life, there are so many things you can learn about how to be a better negotiator, to not only get the things you want, but to get things done, not only in government, but in your personal and even commercial life. One thing I took away from this conversation is that to be a good negotiator, all it takes is being able to listen and to be able to understand and to have the empathetic understanding of the problems, but also of what ways you can find and agree on a solution. Once again, diplomacy is one of the most important things that we can engage in today, not only to avoid future conflict, but to reach a place where we actually have world peace and we have growth, not only as a country, but also as the world as a whole. And with that, thank you so much. We will end with showing you this beautiful memorial here. Bye.